On the day of Daggerheart's release, we were not only gifted with an amazing TTRPG, we were also given The Void, the playtest hub for Daggerheart, allowing us to see into the future, to see what Darrington Press is working on and provide our feedback. So what's on The Void? Let's get into it. So here we are, The Void. At daggerheart.com/The Void, we have two full available classes to playtest, the Warlock class as well as the Fighter class. Let's start by taking a look at the Warlock class. So here's the Warlock's character sheet. Warlock is going to be a combination of Dread and Grace. Dread is a brand new domain available in this playtest, and Grace is one that we did get with the core rulebook launch. So let's go down and check our Hope ability. So our Hope ability is Patron's Protection. On a successful attack against you, you can spend 3 Hope. If you do, the GM must spend a Fear to make the attack hit or it misses. Let's scroll down and take a look at our Warlock Patron, which is going to be our class feature. So if you have a patron to whom you have committed yourself in exchange for power, create a name for your patron and write it above, then add 2 boons that represent your patron's spheres of influence and set their values to 3. Anytime you increase a tier, these boons also gain a permanent +1 bonus. Before making an action roll where the boon would be applicable, you can spend a favor to call on your patron to aid in its bonus to the roll. Here we have our favor. You start with 2 favor. During long rest, pay one of your downtime actions as a tithe to your patron. When you do, gain 1d4 favor from them. If you choose to forego this offering, the GM instead gains a fear. That is very cool. So if you are not paying attention to your patron, there will be consequences. Next up, we have our character guide, suggested traits, weapons, armor, our inventory, basic character descriptors, and then a lot of our background questions. What desperate situation led you to pledging your life to your patron? Your patron has given you one task that you must accomplish above all else. What is it and why does it worry you? You and your patron are similar in a very specific way. What characteristic do you share and how do you feel about it? I love that all of the background questions are specific to a Warlock's patron, making them very patron-centric. On to our subclasses. So for the Warlock, we're going to have 2 subclasses, Pact of the Endless and Pact of the Wrathful. For Pact of the Endless, let's look at the Foundation card. For the Foundation card, we're getting Patron's Mantle. Mark a stress to transform into a terrifying visage that lasts until you take severe damage or the scene ends. While transformed, you can spend a favor in place of an armor slot. You have advantage on rolls to intimidate the target. Also, you have Avoid Death. Before you roll Risk It All on a death move, you can spend favor to add the value of one of your boons to your hope die. Moving over to our specialization, we are going to have Draining Invocation. When an adversary targets you or an ally within very close range with an attack, you can spend a favor to make them roll a d12 instead of a d20 for the attack. Additionally, the adversary must mark a stress and you can clear a stress. Last up, we have our Pact of the Endless Mastery. Once per rest, spend a favor instead of marking any number of hit points. Next, we have Draining Bane. The target of your Draining Invocation also becomes temporarily drained. While drained, all of their attacks use a d12 instead of a d20. For our second subclass, Pact of the Wrathful, we're going to start with Herald of Death. On a failed attack roll, you can spend a favor to re-roll the attack. If it fails again, you must mark a stress. We also get Energy Drain. When you succeed with Hope on an attack roll, instead of taking a Hope, you can choose to have your target mark a stress. Moving over to our specialization, we get Fearsome Attack. When you make a successful attack roll with Fear, you can spend a favor to reroll any number of your damage dice. You can continue spending favor to reroll these dice as many times as you would like. For our Mastery, we're going to get Divine Ire. You can spend favor to imbue your primary weapon with your patron's power. When you do, add an additional d6 to all damage rolls you make with it per favor spent until your next rest. And you're also going to get Patron's Wrath. Once per rest, when you take damage, you can spend a favor for each target within close range. For each you spend a favor for, they must mark a hit point. I think both of these subclasses are very thematic. I love that they're both using the favor mechanic heavily, as well as bringing the Warlock's patron into kind of all aspects of both of these subclasses. All right, let's take a look at the Dread domain. this is the new domain that is going to be available for the Warlock. And there's a couple here that I thought were very nifty that I wanted to kind of go over. I'm not going to go over all of them since this is playtest material, but right here, Dark Army, make a spellcast roll 14. Once per rest on a success, you can mark a stress to summon a group of up to 8 fiends within close range that move with you. Place a d8 on this card set to 8, representing the size of your army. Whenever you deal damage to a target within close range, you can decrease the value by 1 to deal an additional 1d8 of physical damage. When you take damage, you can decrease this value by 1 to reduce the damage by 1d8. Each time the die is decreased, a fiend acts on your behalf, then disappears. When the die's value would be reduced below 1, return this card to your vault. This is a very interesting way to handle the common kind of summoner necromancer kind of archetype that a lot of players like to play. This is a very novel way to deal with that seems very cool, but also is not going to bog down combat with a bunch of little hit point flesh bags that are just kind of going around slowing down the turn order. Another card I found very interesting is Shared Trauma. Once per rest, you can redistribute any marked hit points between 2 willing targets that you can touch. We have a little hit point siphoning with between their Shared Trauma. You also get a lot of interesting things right at level 1. Voice of Dread. You can magically speak into the ears of a creature you can see to torment them with your words. Make a spellcast roll against them. On a success, they must mark a stress or become temporarily vulnerable. You also have Blighting Strike, which I found very interesting due to you go from rolling a d6 damage dice to a d10 if you roll with fear. So fear is going to increase the damage in the Dread domain, which I thought very cool and very thematic for the Dread domain. Last up, we'll take a look at one of the level 10 options, and we'll look at both of them. Invoke Torment. When you deal damage to a creature that has all of its stress marked, you deal double damage. If this defeats them, you can clear a stress. If it doesn't defeat them, they are permanently vulnerable. So if you have a little stress build that you kind of work around with, that it is just marking stress points on adversaries left and right, when that fills up, you will then be doing double damage. The other option at level 10 is going to be Avatar of Malice. You can mark a stress to transform into an Avatar of Malice, gaining the following benefits. All adversaries within close range must spend an additional fear when using a fear feature. When you defeat a creature within close range, you absorb their life essence and clear a hit point. You can mark a stress to teleport to a location within very far range. Every time you make an action roll in this form, you must spend hope. If you can't, you drop this form. That is a very cool ability to get at level 10. Now, the other half of the Warlock domain is Grace. Grace is the domain of charisma through rapture, storytelling, charming spells, or a shroud of lies. Those who channel its power define the realities of their adversaries, bending perception to their will. Grace offers its wielders raw magnetism and mastery over language. Grace gives us access to many flavorful abilities for our Warlock. Things like invisibility or troublemaker. There are also a lot of abilities that are going to have adversaries of the Warlock mark stresses, which are going to play incredibly well into possibly doing double damage once we reach level 10, once all of those stress slots are marked. So what did I think of the Warlock? For a playtest class, I think this is great. I think it shows that they're not afraid to already start experimenting with new domains, but still want to continue using the domains that are already in the core rulebook. I think the hope feature, as well as the fact that the Warlock is very centered on their patron and gaining favor from their patron, really makes it very thematic, and I think it'll play really well in Daggerheart with the collaborative storytelling. So let's look at the fighter next. The fighter is going to be a combination of 2 existing domains, Bone and Valor. Now, for these, Bone is the domain of tactics and the body. Practitioners of this domain have an uncanny control over their own physical abilities and an eye for predicting the behavior of others in combat. Adherents to Bone gain an unparalleled understanding of bodies and their movements. Next up, we're going to have Valor. Valor is the domain of protection. Whether through attack or defense, those who choose this discipline channel formidable strength to protect their allies in battle. Valor also offers Great power to those who raise their shields in defense of others. So going back to our fighter, we're going to see that right from the beginning. We have abilities that are going to play right into those domains. We are going to have staggering strike, spend 3 hope. When you hit an adversary, you also get to deal them a stress and to make them temporarily staggered. While staggered, all attack rolls that they make are at disadvantage, not causing as much damage to our allies, and knowing their body and doing that damage to throw them off balance. Now we're going to go to our class feature. We have I am the weapon. While you don't have any equipped weapons, your evasion has a +1 bonus, your unarmed strikes are considered melee weapons, and use the trait of your choice. And they get to deal a d10 plus your tier physical damage. After that, we get combo strikes. After making a damage roll with a melee weapon, but before dealing that damage to the target, mark a stress slot to start a combo strike. When you duel, roll a combo die and note its value. Then roll another combo die. If that value of the second die is equal to or greater than your first combo die, continue rolling additional die until the last combo die's value is less than the roll that preceded it. Total all rolled combo die and add the value to your weapon's damage. Your combo die starts at a d4. When you level up once per tier, you may use one of your advancement options to increase your combo die instead. Right off the bat, we're feeling a lot of really great fighter flavor. We're feeling that, 1-2 punch, that combo, that knee, elbow, kind of martial arts flavor from the get-go. Moving on to our character guide, we have all of our recommending a quarterstaff. And then for our background questions, where did you spend your time during your formative years that taught you directly or indirectly how to fight in the style you use? What group or organization that you have always had your back and how did you get in their good graces? And then who did you lose to a long time ago that you are desperate for a rematch against? Great background questions for a fighter. This is the martial artist martial form, which we will go into after we take a look at our subclasses. So for our subclasses, we are going to have the Juggernaut and the Martial Artist. First up with the Juggernaut, we're going to start off with our foundation. Rugged, you gain a permanent +3 bonus to your severe damage threshold. And then Overwhelm. On a successful attack, you can spend a hope to force the target to mark a stress. Moving on to our specialization, we have Powerhouse. Increase the damage die for your unarmed attacks to a d12. Eye for an Eye. When you mark more than 1 hit point from an attacker in melee range, the attacker must make a reaction roll 14. On a failure, once per rest, they immediately mark the same number of hit points in return. And lastly, with our Mastery, Pummeljoy, whenever you roll a critical success on a weapon attack against an adversary in melee range, you gain an additional hope, clear an additional stress, and add +1 to your proficiency for the attack, which is going to be a whole nother damage die added on to that attack. Not done yet, when you mark more than 1 HP from your attack, you may gain a hope or clear a stress. Very cool with the Juggernaut, very non-controlled ability, bare knuckle boxing style fighter is the image that I have in my mind. All right, moving on to Martial Artist, the Foundation. Take the martial form sheet. You start with 2 martial stances from tier 1. When you reach a new tier, you get to take 2 additional stances at your tier or lower, and you have focus. Mark a stress to place a number of focus tokens on this card up to the value of your instinct. Spend a focus to activate or shift into a different stance. It lasts until you mark your last hit point. You take severe damage or the scene ends, or you shift into another stance. Moving over to specialization, we have our keen defenses. When you are a target of an attack, you can spend a focus to make the adversary's attack roll use a d12 instead of a d20. You also have Spirit Blast, where you can spend a focus to make an attack roll using instinct against an adversary within close range. On a success, deal d20 +3 magic damage using your proficiency and can spend an additional focus to make them temporarily vulnerable. I just hear Hadouken in my mind. Moving on to our Mastery, Limit Breaker. When rolling your damage from a melee attack, you can spend a focus to shift the value of all damage dice by +1. On any dice that has already landed at their maximum, roll an additional damage die instead. So if you have maximum dice, you can roll an additional die on top of that, increasing your damage, basically your proficiency, by a couple additional ones without having to worry about the proficiency cap. all very nifty. And let's take a look at those stances. So here is our martial artist martial form. We have our stances that are available. We'll do a few of these. Tier 1 stances, we'll do brutal. When you roll the maximum value of a damage dice, roll an additional damage dice. That's awesome. Precise, gain a +1 bonus to your attack rolls. Pretty nifty. Steady, gain a -1 penalty to your evasion. When you deal damage on a successful attack, roll an additional damage die and drop the lowest. Moving down to tier 2, scary. Successful attacks also force the target to mark a stress. That is always useful. Immovable, gain a +2 damage to your damage thresholds, and you cannot be moved unwillingly. Excellent. Hindering, on a successful attack, you can spend a focus to make the target temporarily hindered. While hindered, their attack rolls have a -2 penalty. All of the tier 2 ones are very cool. Moving on to our tier 3 stances, let's do dueling. Gain advantage on attack rolls when there are no other adversaries or allies within very close range of you or your target. Very situational, but I can see where they're going with it. Compounding, when you roll the maximum value on a combo die, increase the size of the subsequent combo die that you roll for the attack. Add a maximum of D12. That is very helpful. Also plays right into your class ability, which is something that I love. Favored, add the trait of your choice to your damage roll. Useful, especially when you start getting up there. You get a lot of pluses to your ability rolls if you want them. And then moving on to tier 4, crushing. When you roll a 1 on a damage dice, it can be treated as the highest value of the die instead. That's very useful, especially if it allows you to trigger like a limit breaker, because you're rolling the maximum on the die, so you can basically anytime you roll the maximum on the die or the lowest amount on the die, you would have. That is really strong. It's probably not the way that that's supposed to work. Any die that has already landed on the maximum, so the die didn't land on the maximum, so that would probably not kind of pair up between the two, but also still very cool. And then sweeping, your attacks target all adversaries within very close range, deal half damage to all targets you succeed against. So in that stance, you're basically getting, there's a tier 1 ability that I love, Whirlwind, that basically does the same thing, but that is just because you are in a stance. It doesn't require any action or you to spend any hope, which is just awesome. I like the stances. I think the stances are very cool and adds a different layer rather than just, you know, hope abilities or things that are going to make you mark stresses or HP. It adds a different level, which I really like, something they also had in the Warlock with the favor feature. So with this, you're going to be using the 2 domains, and those domains give you access to some abilities that I just wanted to point out really synergize well with the fighter. So for our bone abilities, we're going to have a couple that are going to increase our evasion even further if we are not using a melee weapon. But we're going to have Untouchable, gain a bonus to your evasion equal to half of your agility. And then I see it coming. When you're targeted with an attack made from beyond melee range, you can mark a stress to roll a d4 and gain a bonus to your evasion equal to the result against the attack. At level 5, we get Signature Move. Name and describe your signature combat move. Once per rest, when you perform this signature move as part of an action you're taking, you can roll a d20 as your hope. On a success, clear a stress. This can take your normal martial arts fighting and turn it into very cool wrestler type moves. You can have all of a sudden, you know, the Undertaker's Tombstone or another really cool signature ability that you're known by. And I think it adds a cool amount of flavor for a class that already has a lot of really awesome things going for it. And lastly, for this domain, I wanted to go over Breaking Blow. When you make a successful attack, you can mark a stress to make the next successful attack against the target deal an extra 2d12 damage. So if you take that, add in your combo dice, add in the additional things you get for stances, all of a sudden you're stacking a lot of die into your attacks against this target. Just adding those different little combos, those little small hits, I think it just all adds up to a very cool class. Popping over to Valor, you have bare bones. Basically, you're able to not have a weapon and not wear armor and still have a really cool kick-ass character in Daggerheart. In addition to that, we have I Am Your Shield. It's a great one. You can basically hop in front of an attack that an ally is about to take. You're going to mark a stress and you can mark an additional armor slot for it. In addition, we have Rousing Strike. Once per rest, when you critically succeed in an attack, you and your allies who can see you or hear you clear a hit point or 1d4 stress. And at level 8, Full Surge, once per long rest, Mark 3 stress to push your body to its limits, gaining a +2 bonus to all of your character traits until the next rest. That plays into those different stances that allow you to add an additional character trait to the damage of that attack. And that's the fighter. So what do I think of it? I love it. The fighter, I think, plays into so many underutilized things in different TTRPGs. We have, monks, boxers, wrestlers that you can really flavor this class to be and really kind of play out that fantasy if that is what you want to do. You have great synergy, cool both class features, subclass features, as well as some really awesome synergies with the 2 domain cards that already exist and are part of the core rules of Daggerheart. I'm excited to play a fighter. I am going to playtest this class in one of my games. Now, it's very exciting to see already that we have playtest material and an idea of what Daggerheart is going to be working on coming down the road. Darrington Press has put this in front of us and said, hey, we're already working on new stuff, even though we just put out our core rulebook. And I'm excited to see what that is going to be. I'm excited for more adversaries, more cool classes that use existing domains, and more new domains to be utilized. I think there's great balance between some of the ones that are already existing. Just adding the Dread domain, you can make Death Knights, you can kind of combine different melee and Arcana based domains to create these cool little Eldritch Knights or Bladesinger Wizards or whatever that fantasy might be. There are a lot of really great classes and subclasses that I think that can come from that. I want to thank you all for joining me today. Be sure to like and subscribe for more great Daggerheart content. We'll see you next time.